Welcome, untamed hearts. You've returned to Tales by Jenny Moon, a place where the wild waits, where every heartbeat can be hunted, and every touch carries danger. Before we step into the night, know this. Tonight's story will stir your senses, pull at your curiosity, and tempt you with forbidden desire. You'll meet alphas, fated mates, and the primal hunger that binds them. But remember, every choice has its cost. Leave a mark before we begin. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. So the pack knows you are here, and the stories know where to find you. These stories aren't just tales. They are the howls of passion under the full moon, the fire of forbidden desire, the pull of fated bonds that can't be broken. And now, one has found you. It knows your pulse, it senses your curiosity, and it will not let go until its story is told. So stay still. Listen closely. Because in the world of shifters and alphas, every rule broken comes at a price. And remember, untamed heart, once the hunt begins, there's no turning back.
The chains around Selene's wrists bit deeper with every tug of the guard's hands. Her bare feet dragged across the marble floor of the great hall, the cold stone leaching the last of her strength. She lifted her chin anyway, refusing to let them see the tremor in her legs. If this was where she would die, she would not kneel. The palace of Dragor was not what she had imagined in whispered rumors. It was vast, stretching higher than the forest's tallest pines, every torch casting shadows that seemed alive, as though the very walls listened. At the far end of the throne hall sat the man who had ordered her capture, the one they said ruled wolves and men alike with a hand of iron. King Aldrich. He reclined upon a throne carved from obsidian, the flames painting sharp edges across his features. His presence was suffocating, not merely because of his height or the breadth of his shoulders, but because of the silence that cloaked him. The courtiers lining the hall did not dare breathe too loud. Even the guards' heavy boots softened when they drew closer. Selene had been warned of him, the Alpha King who crushed rebellions without lifting a sword, who turned allies into pawns and enemies into ash. A ruler so ruthless that even his wolves did not howl without his command. She expected cruelty. She expected death. What she did not expect were his eyes. Aldrich's gaze fixed on her the moment she was flung at his feet. They were not cold as she had imagined, nor blazing with rage. They were sharp, calculating, like a predator circling prey he wasn't sure if he wanted to devour or study. The weight of that stare pressed against her skin until she could hardly breathe. "Your Majesty," one of the guards barked, forcing her to her knees. "The fugitive Omega from the northern woods as ordered." Selene spat blood from her lip, lifting her head with a defiance that startled even herself. "I am no fugitive. I am nothing to you." A ripple of shock moved through the hall. No one raised their voice before the Alpha King and lived. Aldrich's lips curved into something that might have been amusement, though on him it looked dangerous. "Nothing?" His voice rolled across the room like thunder, low and steady, carrying the weight of command. "You think you are nothing, little wolf?" Her stomach twisted. There was no winning here. Yet still the words slipped past her lips. "Kill me then. Get it over with." Gasps erupted. A woman at the court clutched her pearls. Even the guards' grip tightened on their spears. But Aldrich only leaned forward, resting his chin on his fist as he studied her. The silence stretched long, coiled tight, until Selene thought she might scream from the weight of it. Then, slowly, he rose. Every step he took echoed, deliberate, the sound of boots on marble like a drumbeat. When he reached her, he towered above her trembling form. Selene forced herself to meet his gaze, though her knees begged her to bow. Aldrich bent closer, so near she felt the brush of his breath against her cheek. "No," he said softly, in a voice only she could hear. "Killing you would be far too merciful." Then, in a tone loud enough to ring across the hall, he declared, "Spend one night in my bed, Omega, and I will set you free." The hall erupted in whispers. Nobles clutched at one another, scandal painted across their faces. Selene's heart slammed in her chest. Of all the punishments she had expected, this was not one. One night. Freedom dangled in front of her like a poisoned apple. Her mind reeled. Why? Why her? She was no one, a runaway Omega with no pack to claim her. Why would the Alpha King make such an offer? Unless... Her blood turned cold. Unless he knew. Unless he had seen what she had spent her life hiding. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, her defiance faltered. But she would not beg. She would not give him the satisfaction. If that is the price, I will pay it. Aldrich's smile was slow, predatory. Good. He gestured with one hand, and the guards yanked her to her feet. The great hall emptied in murmurs and scandalous whispers. By the time she was dragged to the king's private wing, Selene's heartbeat had become a storm inside her chest. The chamber doors shut with a heavy boom and silence descended. Selene's breath caught at the sight of the royal bedchamber. Walls draped in crimson, a fire roaring, the air heavy with the scent of sandalwood and something darker. The bed itself could have swallowed her whole, carved with wolves that seemed to watch her every move. The guards left. The lock clicked. She was alone with him. Aldrich did not move toward her. Instead, he removed his crown, setting it aside, and unfastened the heavy cloak at his shoulders. His eyes never left her, sharp and unreadable. "Do not fear," he said at last. She laughed bitterly. "Fear? You demand my body for my freedom, and you tell me not to fear." His jaw tightened, but he did not rise to her words. Instead, he walked past her, to the fire. He poured himself wine, slow, deliberate, as though time itself bent to his will. "You assume too much, Selene." Her blood chilled at the sound of her name. She had not given it. He turned then, wine untouched, eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "I did not say I would touch you. I said you would spend the night in my bed." Confusion lanced through her. What game is this? Aldrich only smirked. One you are not yet ready to understand. And so, the hours crawled. Selene sat stiffly at the edge of the bed, every muscle coiled, waiting for him to act. But he never did. He read by firelight, silent as the hours bled into night. When her eyes fluttered closed from exhaustion, she awoke to find him still watching her, as though she were a puzzle that refused to reveal its pieces. The night passed, long and endless. When dawn spilled gold across the palace windows, Selene's body jolted awake. Her wrists were free, the chains gone. She sat up, staring at him in disbelief. "It's morning." Aldrich stood by the window, his back to her, the light outlining the sharp cut of his shoulders. He did not turn when he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost dangerous in its softness. "You survived the night, Omega." Her chest lifted in hope. "Then I'm free?" Finally he turned. His eyes burned into hers, unreadable but heavy with something she could not name. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough for her to feel the heat of his presence. Then he bent, his lips grazing her ear, his whisper branding her like fire. "No, I cannot let you go." Selene's pulse hammered in her ears. His words echoed like shackles tightening around her throat. "No, I cannot let you go." Her mouth parted, but no sound came. She had survived the night, obeyed the bargain, endured his watchful silence and the unbearable weight of his eyes upon her, and still he would not free her. The Alpha King straightened, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips as if her confusion pleased him. "You think a single dawn could unbind you from me?" Anger, hot and sharp, cut through her chest. "You lied." "I never lie." Aldrich's voice carried the lethal calm of a blade sliding from its sheath. He brushed past her, opening the chamber doors. Guards stepped inside instantly, bowing their heads in silent deference. "The Omega remains. See to it that her chambers are prepared." Her chambers? Selene's heart stumbled. Before she could speak, 2 guards approached. They weren't rough this time. Instead, they offered respectful bows, waiting for her to rise. Confusion tangled with rage, but instinct urged her to move. The king's word was law. She followed them, barefoot and aching, through winding corridors gilded with banners of Dragor's crest, a black wolf entwined with silver flames. At last they stopped before tall double doors painted with roses and vines inlaid with gold. When the doors swung open, Selene froze. The room was vast, draped in silks of ivory and pale blue. Sunlight spilled through arched windows, catching on chandeliers that glittered like stars. The bed was carved from dark mahogany, vast enough for 4, layered with velvet and satin. Perfumed incense curled in the air, soft and intoxicating. Not a prison, a palace. Yet the guards remained at the door, always watching, always near. When they left her alone, Selene touched the silk canopy above the bed, her fingers trembling. The fabric was smooth as water, but it felt wrong against her skin. This was no sanctuary. This was a cage wrapped in finery. She was an omega, imprisoned in silk. By the second day, the whispers began. Servants bowed too deeply when they passed her. Courtiers lingered outside the east wing, their voices hushed but eager. Why is the king protecting a lowborn omega? Why has she been given rooms in the royal wing? Selene burned under their stares, their contempt. The memory of her chains was still raw, but now she wore gowns spun of silk, and jewels rested at her throat. The contrast was dizzying. And every time she entered a chamber, she found him already there. Aldrich. He summoned her into council sessions where maps stretched across the war table and generals argued in hushed tones. At first, she stood silent, bewildered. What use did a king have for her among his advisors? Yet when his gaze found her across the table, sharp and unyielding, he would ask, "And what does the Omega see?" Her voice shook the first time she spoke. "The east flank is vulnerable. If your enemies breach there, the palace will fall within days." The chamber had fallen silent. A general scoffed, but Aldrich raised a single hand. "Mark her words." From then on, he made her speak. He pressed her mind, not her body, tested her with riddles of war and whispers of diplomacy. And still, he never touched her. At night, the palace quieted. Selene lay awake in silken sheets, her body coiled with tension. Sometimes she swore she felt his gaze even in his absence, as though Aldrich's presence lingered in the air itself, coiling around her throat, binding her wrists with invisible cords. When he did come, he never crossed the threshold of her bed. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching her with that unreadable intensity. One night she snapped, her voice hoarse with frustration. "Why do you torment me? Why keep me here only to test me like some pawn?" He tilted his head, wolf-like, shadows flickering across the sharp lines of his face. "Because you are not a pawn, Selene, and I will not let the world waste you." Her breath caught. The words were not a promise. They were a warning. The days blurred. Suspicion gnawed at her. Why her? Why had he chosen her, a nameless fugitive Omega, when courtiers and noblewomen threw themselves at his feet? It was not desire alone. That much was clear. His restraint was worse than any touch, more dangerous, more consuming. The answer came by accident. Selene had grown reckless, desperate to understand. One night, after being dismissed from yet another council session, she wandered deeper into the palace halls. The guards trailed her, but when she feigned exhaustion and slipped into a side corridor, they lingered behind. Her heart pounded as she found herself outside a chamber guarded by obsidian doors. She knew this place. She had seen Aldrich vanish into it each night when he left her, his private throne room. The lock yielded easily to her trembling fingers. She slipped inside. The room was stark compared to the gilded halls of the palace. Dark banners draped the walls, and the throne itself was carved from black stone, massive and imposing. Moonlight poured through tall windows, illuminating the crest carved deep into the back of the throne. Her breath stopped. She staggered closer, fingers brushing over the worn edges of the symbol. A rising sun split by a crescent moon. A wolf's head crowned with thorns. Her family crest. The very same crest her father had carved into the wood of her childhood home before it was burned to ash. Her blood turned cold. What was her family's mark doing on the Alpha King's throne? Behind her, the door creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed into the silence. Selene's heart seized in her chest as a familiar voice slid through the dark, low and dangerous. "You should not be here." The sound of Aldrich's voice behind her froze Selene where she stood. Her fingers were still pressed to the throne's carved crest, her family's mark glowing in the moonlight as though mocking her. Slowly, she turned. The king stood in the doorway, shadows clinging to him like a cloak. The torchlight gilded his hair, sharpened the danger in his eyes. He did not move closer. He didn't need to. The power that rolled off him filled the chamber like a storm about to break. Selene swallowed, forcing her voice not to tremble. "This crest, it is mine, my family's. Why does it sit on your throne?" Aldrich's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing with something she could not name. "Leave." "No." Her defiance cracked like a whip in the silence. "Not until you answer me." For a moment she thought he would snap, order her dragged out, punished, perhaps worse. Instead he strode forward, each step deliberate, until he loomed over her. His scent, spice and steel and something wilder, wrapped around her senses, dizzying, intoxicating. "You are bold, Selene," he murmured, his voice low, dangerous. "Do not mistake my interest for leniency." Her heart thundered, but she tilted her chin. "Then kill me, but if you keep me, you owe me the truth." The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Aldrich's gaze flicked from her eyes to her lips, lingering there too long. Something primal stirred between them, unspoken, too sharp to name. At last he leaned close enough that his breath brushed her ear. "Patience, little wolf. Some truths will burn you alive." And then he turned, striding past her, leaving her with the mark carved into stone and 1,000 questions burning holes through her chest. The next day, Selene woke to the sound of servants chattering and guards bustling in the east wing. By midday, it was clear why. Tonight was the king's grand feast. Nobles from across the realm would attend, and the palace shimmered with frantic preparation. When the maidens brought her a gown, Selene balked. It was silk, dyed deep crimson, embroidered with threads of gold, its bodice designed to cling, to display. Too revealing, too bold. "I cannot wear this," she whispered. The maid only curtsied wide-eyed. "It is the king's command, my lady." "My lady?" Selene's stomach twisted. She was no lady, no noble, just an omega stolen from the wilds and caged in luxury. Yet when the sun dipped low and the bells tolled for the feast, she found herself dressed in the crimson gown, her hair threaded with jewels, her lips painted wine dark. When the guards escorted her into the great hall, all voices fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned, courtiers gasping, noble women stiffening. The hall was ablaze with torchlight and music, tables laden with delicacies. But all attention snapped to her. And then, to him. Aldrich rose from his throne at the head of the feast, clad in black and silver, his presence filling the chamber like a storm contained. His eyes found her instantly. He descended the dais, ignoring the gasps that followed, and extended his hand. "Come." The world tilted. Selene froze, her throat dry. "What?" "You will sit at my side." Whispers broke like waves through the court. Why her? Why an Omega? He led her through the throng of nobles, ignoring their stares, their fury, their envy. He placed her not at the far end of the table, not hidden among servants, but beside him, on the throne's right hand where queens once sat. Selene's chest burned as she sat. Every goblet raised, every jeweled eye glared. They hated her already. The feast began. Noble women paraded themselves before the king, their gowns shimmering, their smiles dripping with honey. One daring lady leaned too close, offering him her goblet. Aldrich barely glanced at her. His attention slid instead to Selene, watching the way her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. The lady flushed and retreated. The others fumed. By the third course, Selene could feel the daggers in their stares. She heard the whispered barbs. She is nothing. A low-born stray. She doesn't belong here. When a noble's daughter accidentally spilled wine near her gown, laughter rippled cruelly through the table. Selene stiffened, humiliation burning through her skin. She clenched her fists beneath the table, refusing to let them see her break. And then his hand closed over hers. The hall stilled. Aldrich rose, pulling her gently to her feet. "Dance with me." The music faltered, then swelled again in disbelief. Gasps filled the air. The king never danced. Selene's heart thrashed as he led her to the center of the hall, every gaze upon them, searing her. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I do," he murmured back. "Let them see." The musicians played, the strings aching with tension. Aldrich placed one hand at her waist, the other holding hers aloft. The heat of his touch seared through the silk, burning her skin. He moved with effortless control, guiding her into the rhythm, his eyes never leaving hers. The court whispered, seethed, burned with envy. But in that moment, Selene felt none of it. She felt only him. And then, their palms shifted, skin against skin. A shock tore through her, white-hot, electric, primal. Her knees nearly buckled. She gasped, staring into his eyes as they widened in the same stunned realization. The mate bond. It roared to life between them, a fire that licked through her veins, tethering her to him with an invisible chain stronger than steel. The hall vanished. The whispers faded. There was only the unbearable pull, the scent of him flooding her senses, the knowledge that her body would never again belong solely to her. Selene's lips parted in horror, in awe. Aldrich's grip on her tightened, his jaw clenched as though he fought the same war raging through her blood. He leaned down, so close his breath grazed her lips, his voice a raw whisper only she could hear. Fate has chosen. The fire of the bond still burned beneath Selene's skin, long after the music had ended. Even when the feast resumed, when courtiers laughed and goblets clinked, she could feel it, an invisible tether stretching between her and Aldrich, pulling, demanding, unrelenting. She tried to eat, to breathe, to think, but every time his hand brushed hers, every time his shoulder shifted against her own, the bond flared hotter. The king's composure was unreadable, but his jaw was taut, his fingers gripping the stem of his goblet as though it were a weapon. The court saw it. They whispered and stared, their envy sharp enough to slice. But before Selene could steady her racing heart, the herald's voice rang through the hall. Announcing Her Majesty, Queen Seraphina of the Western Isles. The doors burst open. A woman swept into the hall like a storm draped in silks. Her gown shimmered like liquid gold, her crown heavy with diamonds that caught every flicker of firelight. She was breathtaking, tall, regal, dangerous in her beauty. And the way the nobles gasped told Selene this was no ordinary guest. Seraphina strode forward, her eyes fixed on Aldrich. "My king." Her voice was velvet laced with steel. "It has been too long." The air thickened. Selene's stomach dropped as the queen lowered herself into a curtsy meant for a husband, not a ruler. She rose with a smile too intimate, too certain. Whispers hissed through the court. She claims him. She has always claimed him. Selene's hands trembled in her lap. The bond burned hotter, twisting her chest. Aldrich rose, his face unreadable. "Queen Seraphina, Dragor welcomes you." She extended her hand as though expecting him to kiss it. Instead, His gaze flickered sideways, to Selene. The silent choice sent another ripple through the crowd. Serafina's smile sharpened. As the feast continued, Selene felt the queen's eyes on her. Every movement was measured, calculated. By the time the third course arrived, Serafina rose gracefully and spoke, her voice loud enough to command the hall. "I hear your court has gained a novelty, a low-born omega." Her eyes slid to Selene with mock pity. "Tell me, Aldrich, do you truly entertain such creatures at your table?" Laughter erupted from certain corners. Selene froze, her cheeks burning. Aldrich's gaze darkened. But before he could speak, Serafina snapped her fingers. "If she must be here, then let her serve as she was born to. Bring her the wine." A servant placed a crystal decanter in Selene's hands. Her heart stuttered. All eyes were on her. Her body shook as she rose, the silk of her gown whispering against the marble floor. She crossed the hall with the decanter, every whisper slicing at her skin. A noblewoman stuck out her foot. Selene barely caught herself, her hand trembling as she filled goblets with wine. Snickers rose around her. Clumsy, untrained, unfit. By the time she reached Serafina, her breath was shallow, her humiliation complete. She poured the wine, her hand steady despite the storm inside. The queen's lips curled. "Pitiful," Serafina said, loud enough for all to hear. "This is the company of kings?" Selene's throat burned. She wanted to run, to vanish, but her pride rooted her in place. She turned to return the decanter, and froze. Aldrich had risen. The music faltered, then stopped altogether. The king descended the dais, his steps measured, predatory. He crossed the hall in silence, the weight of his presence scattering whispers into fearful hush. He stopped before Selene. The decanter nearly slipped from her hands under the force of his gaze. Without a word, he took it from her and set it aside. Then, before the eyes of nobles, servants, and the rival queen herself, Aldrich reached for Selene's wrist. Gasps erupted. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her as though she weighed nothing, and strode back to the dais. The courtiers gaped as he lowered himself into his throne, then drew Selene onto his lap, his arm locking firmly around her waist. The hall roared with disbelief. Serafina's face went pale with rage, but Aldrich ignored her. His lips brushed against Selene's temple, his voice a dangerous growl that carried across the chamber. "This one is mine." The words struck like thunder, silencing all. Selene's body stiffened. Her breath caught. His scent enveloped her, his hand splayed possessively against her hip, his heat sinking into her bones. The mate bond pulsed between them, undeniable, searing. The court erupted into chaos. But Selene heard nothing but the wild hammer of her own heart and the whispered claim that bound her tighter than any chain. The throne room had not quieted even after the king's thunderous claim. Selene could still feel the eyes of the court digging into her skin, feel the heat of whispers curling through the marble hall like smoke. She should have slipped from his lap, should have fled the dais before her humiliation deepened further, but she was caught, snared by the weight of Aldrich's hand, heavy and possessive on her hip. Every muscle in her body was rigid, and yet her heart beat wild and traitorous, betraying her. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to bury herself against him. The conflict left her breathless, trembling in his arms. When at last the herald dismissed the feast, the courtiers scattered like frightened birds, leaving only silence, Aldrich and her. She tried to rise. "Release me." His arm tightened around her waist. "Do not give me orders, Selene." Her name on his lips was low, dangerous, too intimate. Heat spread through her chest, sharp and unwanted. She pressed her hands to his chest, putting space between them. "You humiliated me," she whispered. "I protected you," he countered, voice steady, though his eyes, storm gray and endless, betrayed a flicker of something raw. "Would you rather I let her break you?" Her breath caught. She had no answer. He stood then, drawing her to her feet with him, but instead of dismissing her, he drew her close, fingers brushing her jaw. The mate bond surged like fire beneath her skin, setting her nerves alight. Selene shoved his hand away. "You cannot claim me. You don't even know what I am." Aldrich's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "Then tell me." The words lodged in her throat. For so long, she had buried the memory, the wound too deep to touch. But his presence pressed against her, his scent drowning her senses, and suddenly the truth spilled out, jagged and sharp. "I had a mate once," she whispered. "He rejected me." Aldrich stilled. The silence stretched until it threatened to choke her. She forced herself to go on, even as tears stung her eyes. "He looked at me the way your nobles do, like I was nothing. He cast me aside before I ever belonged. Do you understand now? I cannot be yours. Not after. Enough." His voice cracked like a whip. His hand gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. For a heartbeat, she thought he would kiss her, and her knees nearly buckled at the thought. But then he stepped back, releasing her so abruptly she staggered. "You think rejection is the worst fate that can befall a Luna?" His laugh was bitter, hollow. He turned away, his shoulders taut beneath his cloak. She blinked, confusion clouding her. "What are you saying?" Aldrich faced her again, his expression carved from stone. "Every Luna I have crowned has died. None have survived the blood moon." Her breath caught. "You're lying." "Would that I were." His eyes burned with a grief so profound it silenced her. 3 women, 3 bonds, 3 graves. That is the curse of the Alpha King. Selene's stomach turned. A chill swept over her skin, battling with the heat of his nearness. She searched his face for mockery, for cruelty, but all she saw was truth, and it terrified her. He took a step closer, lowering his voice until it coiled around her like smoke. "If you stay by my side, Selene, you will die." The words hung between them, heavy, irrevocable. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, torn between disbelief and the undeniable conviction in his tone. Her bond screamed at her to stay, to trust him. Her reason demanded she run, but she could not move. She could not look away from him, even as his warning sliced through the last fragile thread of her defenses. The words, "If you stay, you will die," echoed long after Aldrich left her alone in the throne hall. Selene's hands trembled as she pressed them against the cold stone column, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. She should have run then, slipped through the palace gates, vanished into the night before his guards or his bond could stop her. But the bond burned like fire in her blood, dragging her steps back to the east wing instead of away. The palace walls seemed to whisper as she walked its halls, whispers that grew louder in the days that followed. By the second morning, Selene felt them. The eyes, courtiers staring from behind fans and goblets, servants bowing too deeply only to snicker when her back was turned. Her name hissed on their tongues like poison. She bewitched him. A cursed Omega. She'll bring Dragor to ruin. The rumors spread faster than wildfire. By the third day, Selene could barely step into the council chambers without feeling the weight of their disdain. When Aldrich commanded her presence at his side, the whispers only sharpened. Witch. She has snared the king. She'll be the death of him. Selene forced herself to stand tall, but inside, doubt gnawed at her. Had she bewitched him? Was the bond nothing more than a cruel spell? Every time his gaze lingered on her too long, every time his hand brushed hers, the heat that surged between them frightened her. By the fourth night, the whispers turned to action. She was returning to her chamber, the silk of her gown whispering across the floor, when the shadows stirred. A figure lunged from the corner, blade glinting in the torchlight. Her scream never left her throat. Instinct drove her back, the dagger slicing the air where her heart had been. She stumbled, her pulse wild, when suddenly the assassin was wrenched off his feet, slammed against the wall by a hand she recognized even before her eyes found him. Aldrich. His growl shook the air. His grip crushed the man's throat until the dagger clattered to the floor. "You dare?" The sound of it was not human but alpha, dark, primal, enough to send Selene's knees weak. The man gasped, eyes bulging. "She's a witch." The words ended in a sickening crack as Aldrich snapped his neck. The body crumpled to the marble. Silence reigned. Selene's breath came in ragged bursts as she stared at the corpse. Aldrich turned to her, his chest heaving, his eyes glowing like embers. "You are not safe here," he said. She swallowed hard. "Nowhere is safe, is it?" For a moment his fury wavered, replaced by something raw, desperate. His hand lifted, brushing the air near her cheek, but never quite touching, as though afraid his touch might shatter her. Then he made the choice for both of them. "You'll sleep in my chambers." The words left no room for argument. Selene's heart thundered as he guided her through hidden corridors into the heart of the palace, his wing. His rooms were vast, draped in crimson and black, every inch soaked in power. But beneath the grandeur lay something startlingly intimate, the scent of pine and smoke, the heavy presence of him. He dismissed the guards with a look. When the door shut, silence fell, thick and dangerous. Selene stood frozen as he crossed the chamber, tugging off his cloak, his movements sharp with tension. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows across his shoulders, his jaw, the scars carved into his skin. She forced her voice steady. "I don't need your protection." Aldrich turned, his gaze pinning her where she stood. "You nearly died tonight. Don't test me, Selene." Heat coiled low in her stomach. His voice, his presence, the bond, it was too much. She moved toward the bed before she could think better of it, her knees weakening beneath the weight of exhaustion and fear. The mattress was soft beneath her fingers, yet she felt no comfort. Every nerve was taut as Aldrich crossed the room, extinguishing the final lamp until only the firelight remained. When he stopped before her, silence pressed in. She lifted her chin. "If you mean to cage me, then at least admit it." He leaned down, close enough that his breath brushed her cheek, close enough that her body betrayed her with a shiver. "This is not a cage," he murmured, his voice a dangerous caress. "This is the only place I can keep you alive." The bond flared between them, wild, searing, undeniable. For a heartbeat, Selene thought he would close the distance, that his lips would claim hers, that his body would crush her beneath its heat. Her pulse pounded with want, with terror, with need she could not name. But instead, he stepped back. Sleep. His voice was rough, strained, as though dragging himself away from a cliff. She slid into the bed, silk sheets cool against her burning skin. Aldrich turned away, taking the chair near the fire, his broad frame swallowed in shadow. The crackle of the hearth was the only sound. Selene's body ached with exhaustion, but sleep came slowly. She drifted in fragments, dreams woven of fire and chains, of lips that never touched yet burned her all the same. When her lashes fluttered open, the fire had dimmed to embers. The room was still, the night deep, and he was there. Aldrich sat at the edge of the bed, his eyes on her, his expression softened in a way she had never seen, as if the weight of his crown had slipped away, leaving only the man beneath. Her breath caught. His lips moved, the words so soft she might have thought them a dream. "Selene." His voice cracked, a vow in the darkness. "Mine." The bond flared, searing through her, pulling her deeper into the prison of his arms, his secrets, his curse. And she could not look away. The sound of her name still lingered in the air when dawn broke. Selene lay in the king's vast bed, her pulse racing from the memory of his voice, husky in the dark, whispering mine. Her chest ached with the bond's pull, with the fire his nearness had stoked. Yet when she turned, he was gone, vanished as though he had never been there, leaving only the faint scent of pine and smoke on the sheets. The illusion of safety shattered when the herald's knock rattled the chamber doors. The council summons the king. And the Omega. Her stomach turned. She rose, gathering her silk robe, and followed the guards to the council hall. The chamber was crowded, nobles packed shoulder to shoulder, faces sharp with disdain. Aldrich sat upon his throne, a predator disguised in crimson and gold, his gaze locked on her the moment she entered. The High Chancellor stepped forward, bowing low. "Your Majesty, for days now, the court has been unsettled by this creature at your side. Rumors of witchcraft stain your rule. The council demands proof." "Proof?" Aldrich's voice was velvet wrapped around a blade. "Yes." The Chancellor's eyes gleamed as they cut to Selene. "Let the Omega face the trial of the moon. If she is truly Luna, the goddess will favor her. If not..." He spread his hands, mock sorrow twisting his mouth. "Then Dragor will be freed from her poison." The hall buzzed with approval. Selene's knees weakened, but she forced herself upright. Aldrich's jaw tightened. His gaze swept to Selene, burning, asking without words if she would yield. She lifted her chin. "I'll do it." A ripple tore through the chamber. Aldrich's nostrils flared, fury flashing in his eyes, but Selene held his stare. Better to risk the trial than rot in whispers and shadows. By nightfall, the palace's sacred courtyard blazed with torches. The trial of the moon had not been called in decades. Nobles and soldiers gathered, their eyes hungry for blood. Selene stood at the center, draped in white silk that clung to her curves, her hair unbound like a crown of shadows. The high priestess raised her hands. "3 tests shall the goddess decree: the body, the mind, and the bond. If she endures, she shall be Luna. If she fails, she shall perish." The first test began at once. Flames roared around her, a circle of fire closing in, heat searing her skin. Selene gasped, the silk at her ankles threatening to ignite. The council smirked. No Omega could withstand this. But when her knees buckled, her gaze caught his. Aldrich. He stood at the edge of the dais, his fists clenched, his eyes fierce with command. "Do not yield." His stare alone anchored her. Selene forced her body forward. The flames licked at her, but she walked through, skin blistering, breath ragged, until at last the fire died. The crowd erupted in disbelief. The second test struck quickly. A chalice placed before her, filled with venom black as night. "Drink," the priestess intoned. Selene's hands trembled. Her throat ached with fear. She lifted the cup, the poison stench burning her nose. Her lips brushed the rim. And Aldrich moved. Just a step, just a flare of rage in his eyes. But it was enough. "Trust me," his gaze said. Selene swallowed. The venom burned like molten glass, tearing down her throat. Her vision blurred. She collapsed to her knees. Gasps filled the air. The council leaned forward, eager for her death. But the bond surged, searing her veins, flooding her with heat and fire. Her body convulsed, then steadied, her breathing slow, sure. She rose, lips stained black, alive. The courtyard erupted in chaos. The priestess paled. "The third test, the bond." She gestured, and Aldrich stepped into the circle. The crowd hushed, sensing what was to come. The priestess's voice rang out. "If she is Luna, the bond will answer true. If not, it will destroy them both." Selene's heart thundered. Aldrich's steps echoed as he closed the space between them. His hand lifted, trembling as it reached for hers. When their palms touched, the world exploded. Heat ripped through her body, wild, uncontrollable, like lightning and fire and hunger all at once. Selene gasped, arching toward him, her skin burning where his touched hers. Their bond roared alive, searing through marrow and soul. She saw flashes. His past, his pain, his curse, his endless loneliness. And he saw hers, her rejection, her fear, her defiance. The crowd shouted, some screaming witchcraft, others silenced by awe. Selene fell against him, their breaths ragged, their bodies shaking as the bond's fire receded. They stood locked together, chest to chest, eyes wide. The priestess lowered her head. "The goddess has spoken." She is Luna. The crowd erupted. Some raged, some wept, some fell silent with fear. Selene turned, expecting the crown, expecting at last the chains of doubt to fall away. Her chest swelled with triumph, her body trembling with the bond's lingering fire. But Aldrich did not move. His face was unreadable, his hands still trembling from the bond's touch. He stared at her as though she had been carved from both salvation and ruin. At last he spoke, his voice cutting through the night like steel. "She is not my Luna." The world stilled. Selene's breath caught, her triumph shattering into dust. The council gasped, the priestess reeled, the crowd roared in disbelief. And Selene stood frozen, her heart tearing open as Aldrich's denial echoed into the night. The echo of Aldrich's denial haunted her long after the torches of the courtyard had burned low. "She is not my Luna." The words gnawed at Selene's chest, ripping through the fragile triumph she had clawed from the trial. The fire of the bond still pulsed inside her, searing, undeniable. Yet he had denied her, cast her victory into shadow before the eyes of the entire kingdom. She paced her chamber, silk skirts dragging, breath ragged. She told herself she would not cry, not for him, not for anyone. She had survived fire, venom, the judgment of gods. She would survive this too. The heavy doors boomed open. The herald's voice rang through the hall outside, sharp with surprise, announcing Lord Darius of the Black River Pack. Selene froze. Her stomach turned cold. The name struck like a knife. And then he stepped into the throne hall. Tall, broad-shouldered, his smirk carved in cruelty, Darius moved with the arrogance of one who thought the world owed him everything. His eyes, those cold, familiar eyes, found her instantly. "Selene." His voice dripped with mockery, with ownership. "My little Omega." Her knees weakened, breath snagging in her throat. Memories flashed. The moment he had rejected her, the laughter in his voice, the way her soul had splintered under the bonds shattering. She gripped the arm of her chair to keep from collapsing. Aldrich rose from the dais. His presence filled the hall in an instant, his power pressing against the marble walls, against the nobles who dared to whisper, "State your purpose." His tone was lethal. Darius smiled, a predator's grin. "I've come to reclaim what is mine." Selene's chest constricted. "I rejected her once, it's true," Darius continued, swaggering forward. "But word travels fast. She has bewitched your court, wormed her way into your bed. She belongs to me, and I will take her back." Gasps filled the hall. Selene's breath came fast, her nails biting into her palms. The bond inside her screamed, revolted by the sound of Darius's voice, by the claim he dared to make. Yet fear gnawed at her all the same. Would Aldrich let him? Would the king who had denied her claim allow her to be torn away, discarded like refuse once more? She looked at him then, at the Alpha King standing tall before his throne. His eyes burned like silver fire, his jaw set in fury. "Step closer," Aldrich said softly, "and you will not leave this hall alive." The chamber stilled. Darius laughed. "You would start a war for an Omega? For a lowborn reject?" Aldrich descended the dais, each step slow, deliberate, terrifying. When he reached Selene, he did not speak. He simply reached for her hand. Her breath caught as his fingers locked with hers. The bond roared alive, searing hot, undeniable. "She is mine," Aldrich said, his voice thunder, his eyes locked on Darius. "And if you dare touch what is mine, I will burn your pack to ash." Selene's chest heaved. Her body trembled beneath the weight of his claim. She should have pulled away, should have reminded herself of the trial, of his denial. But the bond consumed her, the fire of his touch unraveling her restraint. And then, he pulled her against him. His lips crashed onto hers, fierce and demanding, a kiss that stole her breath and shattered her world. Selene gasped into him, her hands gripping the hard planes of his chest. The taste of him, dark, intoxicating, pure alpha, flooded her senses. His mouth claimed her with a hunger that burned through bone and soul. Her body arched against him, heat pooling low in her stomach, every nerve alive with fire. His hand slid to her waist, pressing her flush against him, as though he would fuse them together. The hall erupted in gasps and whispers, but Selene heard nothing. There was only his mouth on hers, his breath mingling with her own, his tongue coaxing hers in a dance that left her weak and desperate. When he broke the kiss, her lips tingled, her chest heaved. His forehead rested against hers, his growl vibrating through her skin. "Never again," he whispered so low only she could hear. "No one will take you from me." Her knees nearly buckled, but the moment shattered when Darius sneered. "You crown her with your mouth, yet not with your throne. Which is it, Aldrich? Is she yours or is she a toy?" Selene flinched. The words stung because they were too close to truth. She searched Aldrich's face, desperate for an answer. His expression hardened, carved in fury. He lifted his head, his voice echoing through the chamber like a death toll. Guards, armored soldiers, stepped forward. Aldrich's hand did not release hers as he gave the order, his eyes locked on her betrayer. "Take him to the dungeons. At dawn, his head falls." The court erupted in chaos. Selene's heart pounded so violently she could barely breathe. Darius shouted, cursed, struggled as guards dragged him away. But she heard only Aldrich's voice, final and merciless, ringing in her ears. Execution at dawn. The man who had once shattered her life would die. And it was Aldrich, her king, her bond, her tormentor and protector, who had condemned him. The throne hall had not yet stilled. The echo of Aldrich's words, "At dawn his head falls," still vibrated through the marble pillars when Selene's voice broke it all. "Wait." Her whisper was small, but it pierced through the clamor like a blade. Nobles gasped. Counselors turned. Even Aldrich froze, his silver gaze snapping to hers. Selene's chest heaved, her lips still swollen from his kiss, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had sworn she would never speak for Darius again. He had broken her, left her to die in the ruins of a bond shattered. But watching him dragged like an animal to slaughter, her instincts betrayed her. "Please." The words scraped raw from her throat. She took a step forward, trembling under the weight of every eye in the hall. "Spare him." The silence after was deafening. Aldrich's expression turned to stone. His jaw clenched, the muscle ticking like a heartbeat of rage. "Spare him." His voice was a low growl, vibrating through her bones. "The man who left you to bleed? Who dares claim you even now?" Her knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Yes. If you kill him, you prove him right. That all Omegas are powerless pawns. Let him live. Let me prove him wrong." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some nobles hissed curses under their breath. Others whispered of witchcraft. To beg for her betrayer was madness, suicidal madness. Aldrich descended from the dais in slow, dangerous strides. The bond between them roared, tightening around her chest, pulling her into his orbit until she could no longer breathe. He stopped before her, his height a wall of fury and raw heat. "You dare beg me for him?" Selene's lips parted, words trembling. "I beg you, for me." Something broke in him then. In one motion, Aldrich seized her wrist, dragging her flush against him. His breath scorched her cheek, his scent, dark pine, smoke, wildness, flooding her senses. "You think I'll let you plead for another man in my hall?" His words were rough velvet, soft and lethal. "You think I'll let you look at anyone but me?" His hand tilted her chin up. Silver fire burned in his eyes, fury and desire twisted together. Then his mouth crushed down on hers. This was no kiss of possession for the court to witness. This was fire unleashed, unrestrained hunger that consumed everything in its path. His tongue parted her lips, hot and demanding, claiming every gasp she gave him. Selene moaned into him, her hands fisting against his chest, torn between pushing him back and dragging him closer. Heat scorched through her body, curling low in her stomach until she thought she might shatter. He deepened the kiss, growling into her mouth, one hand sliding down her back, pressing her against the hard ridge of his arousal. The shock of it ripped through her. He wanted her fiercely now, with the court still watching. Her knees buckled, and he caught her, lifting her slightly, devouring her mouth with a hunger that bordered on madness. The bond flared, white-hot, sparks racing through her blood, igniting places she had long buried in shame. When he tore his lips from hers, her breath came ragged, her lips slick and swollen, her body trembling like a bow drawn to breaking. The court was deathly silent. Not a single soul dared breathe. Aldrich's voice carried through the hall, low and merciless. Chain her to my side, day and night. No step, no breath, without me. The guards hesitated, shocked. Selene's eyes widened. Aldrich. Silence. His thumb brushed her lip, possessive, almost reverent. His gaze softened for a fleeting instant, as though he'd betrayed more than his pride. Then he leaned down, his breath a vow against her ear. I do not just want you, Selene, he whispered, voice breaking with something rawer than rage. I need you. Without you, I will not survive. Her body froze, her heart lurching violently in her chest. The king, unshakable, merciless, eternal, had just admitted need, and need was more dangerous than any crown. The night was heavy with silence after Aldrich's confession. Selene could still feel his words burning inside her like molten metal. I need you. Without you, I will not survive. Need. From a king. She had lain awake on the silk-covered couch in his private study, her wrist still circled by the golden chain he'd ordered, an unbreakable tether that bound her to him not just in body but in fate. Her thoughts whirled, her lips still tingling from the savage kiss he had given her before the court. And yet, even with his vow ringing in her ears, doubt gnawed at her. Doubt that whispered he was still a king with 100 choices, 1,000 women who would gladly offer their bodies if it meant a taste of his throne. That fear clawed deeper when she rose in the night to fetch water. The halls of the East Wing were dark, lit only by flickering torches. She walked in silence, barefoot against marble, her chain clinking softly. And then, she froze. A door ahead, slightly ajar, light spilling from within. His chambers. A soft laugh drifted out. Female. Selene's blood turned to ice. She moved forward before she could think, her body trembling, her heart battering her ribs like a trapped bird. Through the gap in the door, she saw her. Lady Mirabelle, the daughter of a powerful duke, draped across Aldrich's bed like a serpent, her gown slipping from her shoulders. Her voice purred, sweet poison. The kingdom doubts her, my king, but I could give you everything you desire. Selene's breath hitched, her chest cracking. And then she saw him, Aldrich, standing at the edge of the bed, his face shadowed in the firelight. Mirabelle rose, stepping toward him with liquid grace, her hands reaching for the cords of his shirt. Selene's world shattered, her lungs refused to fill. She stumbled back from the door, her vision blurring, the chain at her wrist rattling like betrayal itself. Of course, she thought bitterly. Of course he would choose someone else. He denied me before. His need was nothing but lust dressed as fate. Tears stung her eyes, hot and humiliating. She turned to flee. And then it happened. A violent crash echoed from the chamber. Do not touch me! Aldrich's roar thundered through the walls. Selene spun back, heart in her throat. The door burst open. Mirabelle stumbled out, hair tangled, cheek red where his hand had shoved her away. She clutched her gown to her chest, humiliated fury twisting her face. No one touches me but her. The words ripped from Aldrich's chest like a vow to gods and wolves alike. The court lady gasped, her eyes wide with terror, before fleeing down the hall. And then Aldrich filled the doorway, his eyes molten silver, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. He looked like a man dragged to the brink of madness, and Selene knew she was the reason. She stumbled back, tears on her cheeks, her voice breaking. You saw nothing but a viper trying to sink her teeth where they do not belong, Aldrich growled, striding toward her. Selene, look at me. She shook her head, heart shattering all over again. I thought you... But her words were swallowed as he seized her face in his hands and crushed his mouth to hers. This kiss was not the court spectacle, not the fire-forged claim of the bond. This was desperation. Raw, primal, unbearable need. His lips devoured hers, hot and insistent, his tongue sweeping into her mouth until she moaned against him. He pressed her back against the cold stone wall, his body caging hers, his hands burying in her hair. Selene gasped into him, trembling as his thigh slid between hers, forcing her legs apart, dragging a whimper from her throat. Heat surged through her, her body arching, clinging to him as though he were the only air she had left. His kiss deepened, hungry and consuming. Every stroke of his tongue a promise, every rough tug of her lower lip a punishment for her doubt. When he finally tore away, his breath burned against her swollen mouth, his forehead pressed to hers. You are mine, he rasped, voice breaking with fury and want. Mine, Selene. Do you understand? I will tear this palace apart stone by stone before I let another touch me. Her chest heaved, her body trembling under the weight of his words. She wanted to speak, to resist, but her voice was gone. All she could do was cling to him as his mouth descended again, softer this time but no less desperate, sealing the vow between them in heat and fire. The echo of Aldrich's vow still trembled through the corridors of the East Wing. No one touches me but her. Selene lay restless in her chamber, lips still swollen, her body aching from the kiss that had left her undone. Her heart should have been soothed, but instead it raced, wild and restless, as though her very soul was pacing in a cage. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, his fury, his desperation, the unyielding way he had pressed her to the stone and claimed her mouth like it was the only thing anchoring him to life. She told herself it was madness to feel wanted by a king who denied her crown. Madness to ache for him when the palace around them whispered and plotted. Yet when dawn broke, and a servant summoned her to his chambers, she found herself trembling with something dangerously close to anticipation. Aldrich was already waiting. He stood by the tall windows, sunlight catching the sharp planes of his face, his silver eyes softened only by the moment they fell upon her. You didn't sleep, he said, voice low, intimate. Selene swallowed. Neither did you. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. How could I? You haunt me. Heat rushed through her unbidden. She dropped her gaze, but he closed the distance in a few slow, deliberate strides. His hand brushed her cheek, tilting her face back up. You think me a monster, don't you? He murmured. And yet you burn for me all the same. Before she could deny it, his mouth captured hers again, softer this time but no less consuming. His lips moved against hers with aching slowness, tasting, teasing, coaxing a whimper from her throat. His tongue brushed hers, lazy and hot, and her knees weakened. Her hands clutched the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer, until his arm locked around her waist and crushed her against the hard wall of his body. His arousal pressed against her stomach, unmistakable, and she gasped into his mouth, heat spiraling low and fierce. When he pulled back, his breath was ragged. Tonight, he whispered, the court will gather. They think they can turn me from you. They will try. His hand tightened on her waist. Stay close to me, Selene. Do not leave my side. She nodded, though her pulse thundered. His protectiveness was possessive, suffocating, and yet it left her shivering with something she dared not name. That night, the great banquet hall blazed with candlelight and danger. Selene walked at Aldrich's side, her golden chain gleaming like a brand, every noble eye fixed upon her. Some stared with naked envy, others with cold hatred. Whispers slithered through the air like serpents. An Omega in the king's place of honor. She weakens him. She will be the ruin of us all. Aldrich ignored them all, his hand resting on the small of her back, his presence a silent command to silence. They dined, feasted, drank, but beneath the music and laughter, Selene felt the tension coiling tighter. The bond inside her pulsed, warning, restless, as though some unseen danger crept closer with every passing heartbeat. And then she saw it. A servant poured Aldrich's wine. The faintest shimmer clung to the rim of the goblet, unnatural, oily. Selene's breath caught. Instinct screamed, poison. Before she thought, before reason could tether her, her hand shot out. She seized the goblet, lifted it to her lips, and drank. The hall froze. The wine slid down her throat, bitter, burning like fire. Her body convulsed, her stomach twisting. The goblet slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "Selene!" Aldrich's roar shook the hall. He caught her as her knees buckled, his arms closing around her trembling body. Her vision blurred, darkening, the world tilting. Gasps erupted, shouts, accusations. The nobles rose in chaos, but Aldrich's voice cut through them all like a blade. "Guards!" His fury was monstrous, his eyes glowing silver fire. "Seal the doors. No one leaves until I have blood." Selene choked, her lips trembling, the burn spreading through her veins. She clutched at his chest, her voice weak. "It was meant for you." His face broke. The king, the alpha wolf who ruled with iron and fire, shook with horror. "No, not you." His arms tightened, cradling her against him as though sheer strength could keep her alive. "Don't leave me, Selene. Not you." Her body convulsed again, pain tearing through her, and her head fell against his chest. The hall blurred, sound fading, until only his voice anchored her, raw and broken. Aldrich pressed his forehead to hers, tears spilling unchecked down his face, his mask shattered. "Don't leave me," he whispered, over and over. A plea, a vow, a command. "Not you, not you." And with her last thread of consciousness, Selene realized the truth. The king of wolves was weeping. The world blurred in fragments of firelight and darkness as Selene drifted in and out of pain. She remembered Aldrich's roar shaking the banquet hall, his arms lifting her, strong but trembling, his voice breaking as he carried her through the labyrinth of corridors. Then, nothing. When she woke again, it was to the scent of smoke and pine, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat beneath her cheek. She lay in a vast bed, silk sheets cool against her fevered skin, the golden chain still fastened around her wrist, anchored now not to the throne, but to him. Aldrich sat at her side. His armor was gone, his shirt wrinkled and damp where her tears had soaked it. His hair fell loose around his face, and for the first time, he looked less like a king and more like a man undone. She shifted slightly and his head snapped up. "Selene." Her name left his lips like a prayer. His hand cupped her cheek instantly, as though to reassure himself she was real. "You're awake." Her throat burned. Barely. He let out a sound between a laugh and a sob, pressing his forehead to hers. His hand trembled against her skin. "You should have let me drink it. It was meant for me." "I couldn't." Her voice was a whisper, but the truth rang clear. "I wouldn't." For a moment, his expression cracked entirely, his silver eyes shining with emotions he could no longer hide. Then he pressed his lips to her brow, lingering, almost worshipful. "You reckless, maddening woman," he murmured. Later that night, when she stirred again, the chamber was quiet. Aldrich thought her asleep, his hand still clasping hers on the coverlet. His head bowed, shoulders trembling. Selene blinked against the haze of fever, her lashes lowering as she feigned rest. And then she heard it. His voice, low and ragged, breaking in a way she had never heard from him before. "Moon goddess," he whispered, his words shuddering into the silence. "Take me, not her. Take my crown, my blood, my life. Just leave her. Please." Selene's breath caught, tears filling her eyes. This was the Alpha King, feared by nations, begging the gods like a desperate man, begging for her. "You can curse me, break me, damn me," he continued, his forehead pressing to their joined hands. "But don't take her. She is mine. She is..." His voice cracked. "She is my fated mate." Selene's heart stopped. The words slammed into her chest, tearing her wide open. Fated mate. The truth she had felt burning in every stolen glance, every furious kiss, every pulse of the bond between them, spoken at last. Tears slipped down her cheeks as he lifted his head. He hadn't realized she was awake. Her fingers tightened weakly around his hand. His eyes snapped to hers, widening, raw with guilt. "You heard?" Her lips trembled. "You should have told me." He closed his eyes, anguish twisting his features. "I couldn't. The curse. Damn the curse." Her voice broke, but her heart soared even through the pain. She reached up, her palm brushing his jaw. "I don't care what doom you fear. You are mine too, Aldrich, and I..." Her throat tightened. "I love you." The silence that followed was unbearable. His chest rose and fell in a shudder, his lips parting as though her words had struck harder than any blade. Then he was upon her. His mouth crashed onto hers, fierce and desperate, kissing her as though he could pour every vow, every fear, every broken plea into her. His lips were hot, bruising, his tongue sliding against hers in a kiss that consumed, devoured, destroyed. Selene gasped into him, her fingers clutching his shirt, pulling him closer until his body pressed against the length of hers. His weight bore down on her, heavy and grounding, his heat searing into her fevered skin. He kissed her again and again, each one deeper, wetter, hotter, until she was drowning in him. Her body trembling with need that had no place in sickness but demanded release all the same. His mouth tore from hers only to trail down her throat, sucking at the sensitive skin there, leaving a mark of possession that made her moan. His hand slid to her waist, gripping her tightly as if to tether her to life itself. "Mine," he rasped against her skin. "You are mine. I will not lose you. I will never let you go." Her heart threatened to burst from her chest. She arched into him, letting him kiss away the fear, the poison, the curse, until only their bond remained, burning, unbreakable, eternal. When he finally pulled back, his lips were slick, his eyes wild. He pressed his forehead to hers again, his breath ragged. "I will defy the curse. I will defy the gods themselves. You will live, Selene. You will be my Luna." Her tears fell freely, mingling with his, as her chest ached with the dangerous, beautiful truth. She loved him, but love, she knew, would not be enough to silence the curse that hung over them. The night before the blood moon dawned heavy and restless. The palace pulsed with unease, as though every stone in its walls anticipated disaster. Selene stirred in Aldrich's arms, still weak but warmed by the steady thrum of his heartbeat against her back. His lips brushed the crown of her head in a sleepy kiss, his hand curved possessively around her waist. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel safe, claimed, wanted, loved. But safety was fragile. The attack came when the torches dimmed low and the guards shifted at the gates. Shadows slipped into the east wing, silent as serpents. She didn't sense it until a hand clamped over her mouth, yanking her from Aldrich's arms. Her muffled scream was swallowed by darkness as a hood covered her face, rough voices muttering, "Quick, before the king wakes." She struggled, her wrists bound, her pulse thundering. And then she heard it, a voice she thought she would never hear again. Selene, her old mate, the one who had cast her aside like filth. His scent, sharp, bitter, haunting, wrapped around her. They carried her through the forest far from the palace walls, until at last they threw her to her knees in a ruin lit by blood-red candles. When the hood was pulled away, her heart froze. It was him. the man who had once broken her beyond repair. His eyes glinted with malice, his smile twisted. "You thought you could belong to him?" he sneered, crouching before her. His fingers tilted her chin up, mockingly tender. "You were always mine, Selene. Faded or not, you carry my mark. And now?" His smile widened. "You'll be my offering." Terror clawed at her throat. Around them, symbols carved in blood glowed faintly. A ritual circle. She understood then. He planned to sacrifice her during the blood moon, severing her bond to Aldrich, breaking the king's will before his pack. Her ex-mate leaned closer, his breath hot on her cheek. "Do you still ache for me?" His hand slid cruelly against her thigh, forcing her body to remember what her heart despised. "Or has he ruined you for anyone else?" She flinched, shame and fury colliding inside her. But then it hit. Faint, far away, yet blazing like a firestorm. Aldrich's wolf, the bond between them seared to life, flooding her chest with his rage, his anguish. His howl split the night, carried by the wind, raw, savage, uncontainable. Back in the palace, Aldrich had woken to cold sheets, to emptiness. And when he scented her absence, when he realized she was gone, his control shattered. The wolf inside him, chained by years of discipline, tore free. His roar rattled the palace as his claws split stone, his eyes burning silver. "Where is she?" His voice was no longer human. It was thunder. It was war. He cut through guards and traitors alike, tearing through every barrier between him and her. The scent of her fear was driving him mad. In the ruin, Selene's captor chuckled darkly, tracing her cheek with mock affection. "He's coming," he murmured, almost delighted. "Good. Let him watch as you kneel before me. Let him feel the bond break when you submit to me one last time." Selene's body trembled, not from desire, but from the cruel way his hand forced her chin. From the memories of rejection he twisted like knives. Yet the bond with Aldrich pulsed hotter, brighter, pulling her toward the king who would tear the world apart for her. The door crashed open. Aldrich filled the threshold, silver eyes blazing, half shifted into the beast. His chest heaved, his claws dripping blood, his lips peeled back in a snarl that shook the ruin. "Touch her again," he roared, "and I will rip you apart, mate bond or no." The rival only smirked, dragging Selene closer to him, pressing his lips to her temple in a mockery of intimacy. Aldrich's howl tore the air, shaking stone from the walls. Selene's breath hitched. Her ex-mate's whisper slid against her ear, venomous and cruel. "Choose. Submit to me, and he lives. Refuse, and I'll slit his throat before your eyes." Her heart thundered. Tears blurred her vision as Aldrich's silver gaze locked with hers, wild, pleading, ready to burn the world down for her. She was trapped between past and future, between the mate who had destroyed her and the one who could die because of her. And as the blood moon rose crimson and merciless, Selene realized the impossible truth. She would have to choose. The world burned red under the blood moon. Selene's body trembled in her captor's grip, her ex-mate's voice coiling like poison in her ear. "Submit to me and he lives. Refuse, and he dies." But Aldrich's silver gaze across the chamber, raw, feral, desperate, ignited something deeper than fear. It lit the wildest part of her soul. She was not a girl cast aside anymore. She was not a victim of rejection. She was the mate of a king. Her ex-mate dragged her forward into the ritual circle, the blade gleaming at his hip, his breath hot and foul against her skin. "Kneel, Selene. Break your bond with him, or I'll sever it for you with his blood." Her heart thundered. She let her knees bend, let her shoulders sag in feigned surrender. His grip loosened just slightly as arrogance flared in his grin. That was his mistake. With a snarl torn from the depths of her chest, Selene snatched the dagger from his belt and plunged it backward, straight into his side. His howl ripped the ruin. Blood spattered across the stones. "You will never own me," she hissed, twisting the blade. Not then. Not now. Not ever. He staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, and collapsed. The bond between her and Aldrich flared, bursting through the chamber like wildfire. Aldrich moved in a blur, his wolf unleashed. Claws tore through the traitors, his fury shaking the very ground. He was on her in moments, tearing the last ropes from her wrists, pulling her against him so tightly she could scarcely breathe. Mine. He growled into her hair, his hands gripping her as if he might break without her. Mine. Always. Her tears streaked his chest, her lips trembling against his skin. But even through the terror, through the adrenaline, their bond blazed hotter, searing, undeniable, demanding, her hands fisted in his cloak, yanking his mouth to hers. The kiss was fire and ruin. His lips crushed hers, desperate, claiming, pouring every ounce of rage and relief and need into her. She gasped against him, and his tongue swept deep, devouring her, tasting her as though the blood moon itself demanded it. She moaned, arching into him, their bodies colliding with reckless abandon. His hands roamed her, possessive and rough, dragging her closer until no space remained, until she could feel the hard length of him pressing against her belly. The bond between them pulsed like a living flame, each touch sparking hotter, each kiss tearing her further from reason. Selene. His voice was ragged against her mouth, his teeth grazing her lower lip before he kissed her again, harder. You undo me. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him down as she rose onto her toes, needing more, needing all of him. The ruin, the blood, the world outside. It all disappeared. There was only the king and his omega, devouring each other under the crimson sky. When his hand slid beneath the torn fabric of her gown, gripping her thigh and hauling her against him, she gasped into his mouth, her body alight with heat. He pressed her to the cold stone wall, caging her with his strength, his hips grinding into hers with barely restrained hunger. It was madness. It was salvation. It was the mate bond consuming them whole. But then, pain. Aldrich stiffened, breaking the kiss with a gasp. Blood seeped from his nose, his chest heaving. His silver eyes dimmed as though a shadow passed over them. No, Selene whispered, clutching him as his knees buckled. The blood moon glared overhead, crimson light pouring into the ruin, wrapping around the king like chains. The air thickened with dark power. The curse. Aldrich collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest, blood staining his lips. He tried to speak, to warn her, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. The prophecy. It begins. Selene held him, her tears falling hot on his face. Stay with me. Please, Aldrich. But his head sagged against her chest, his blood soaking her gown, his crown slipping from his brow and clattering to the stones. The king was bleeding beneath the blood moon, his curse unleashed. And Selene, trembling and desperate, realized that loving him might cost her everything, his throne, his soul, his life. The throne room trembled with the weight of the blood moon. Selene staggered beneath Aldrich's weight, her gown torn and soaked with his blood. Each step up the marble stair echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. The nobles gasped, guards faltered, courtiers whispered witch, curse, doom. Yet she did not stop. She would not. She dragged the Alpha King, her mate, her love, to the very heart of his power. The silver throne loomed, wreathed in shadows, its crest gleaming in the moonlight, the place where kings rose and kings died. She collapsed with him against the cold stone dais, cradling his head in her lap. His eyes fluttered open, dull silver clouded with pain. Selene. His voice cracked, a ghost of the thunder it once was. His blood smeared her trembling hands. You must let me go. The curse. No. Her voice cut through the hall like steel. She lifted her chin, glaring at every watching pair of eyes, at the nobles who waited for her to break, at the council who prayed she would fail. I will not let fate decide. Not for him. Not for me. The torches guttered. The blood moon swelled, its crimson light pouring through the high windows until the hall was awash in scarlet. The moon goddess herself was watching. Selene pressed her forehead to Aldrich's, her tears streaking down his bloodied cheek. "Hear me," she whispered to the unseen deity. "If you demand sacrifice, then take me. If you demand choice, then I choose him. I choose my mate, my king." Her words echoed into the silence, heavy with defiance. The air thickened. Power rippled through the chamber, rattling the pillars, shaking the very ground. The court dropped to their knees. Aldrich's chest heaved against her, his pulse weakening. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. "Selene, you'll damn yourself." But she silenced him the only way she could. She kissed him. It was not a kiss of gentleness. It was raw, unyielding, a firestorm of hunger and vow. Her lips crashed to his, desperate and deep, her tongue tangling with his in a dance of need that scorched them both. He groaned against her mouth, his hand, weak but fierce, gripping her nape, pulling her closer as though he could devour her whole. Their bond blazed white-hot, sparking down her spine, searing her chest, flooding her veins with heat until she cried out into his mouth. The throne room vanished. The whispers, the curses, the gods themselves, all fell away. There was only this kiss, this fire, this collision of two souls made and broken and remade again. She straddled him on the throne steps, her body pressed to his, her fingers clawing into his hair. His teeth grazed her lip, drawing a gasp that turned into another frantic kiss. Deeper, hotter, desperate as if they could drink life itself from each other. "Selene." His voice was a growl against her lips, his tongue claiming her mouth again. His hand dragged down her spine, pulling her flush against the hard lines of his body, blood and heat mingling between them. She moaned, grinding against him, and the bond flared, flooding them both with such fierce, uncontainable passion that she thought they would burn alive. His hips surged, his mouth devoured, his growl vibrated through her chest as though he was branding her from the inside out. The moon's light burst around them, crimson bleeding into silver, the curse colliding with the bond they sealed with every kiss, every touch, every desperate cry. Her lips tore from his only to gasp his name. "Aldrich." His silver eyes snapped open, blazing brighter than ever, his fangs lengthening as he crushed her to him, kissing her again with savage, unstoppable hunger. The kiss turned molten, his tongue sweeping her mouth, his groan guttural and primal as if the goddess herself demanded this binding. It was the hottest kiss of their lives, a sealing of soul to soul, body to body, vow to vow. Then, silence. The curse screamed as it shattered. The crimson glow cracked like glass, fragments of light splintering across the hall. Aldrich's body convulsed once, twice, then steadied beneath her. He breathed. Alive. Selene sobbed, clutching him, their lips meeting again and again, softer now, but no less desperate, no less hot. His hands framed her face, trembling but sure, his kiss slowing into something fierce and eternal. "You saved me," he whispered against her mouth, his forehead pressed to hers. "You bound us before gods and men. Selene, my Luna." The court wept, cheered, bowed, but Selene heard none of it. She only felt his lips, still burning against hers, the taste of blood and love and eternity mingling on her tongue. Yet as the moon's glow dimmed, as dawn began to creep at the edges of the sky, a shadow lingered. The prophecy had broken, but not completely. Something unseen shifted, silent and patient, waiting for its time. But for now, for this moment, she had her king, and nothing in heaven or earth could tear them apart.
And so, the story pauses. But here, endings are illusions. In Tales by Jenny Moon, the fire never dies. The hunt may pause, but the desire lingers. Some hearts wait quietly under the moon. Others burn and claw for the next tale to be told. If you dare return, another story will be waiting. And the pack always watches. But beware. The deeper you wander, the harder it becomes to escape the pull of the wild. The night never sleeps, and neither do the things that stir within it. If you survived this chapter, step deeper, subscribe, comment, and mark your presence so the pack knows who dares to listen. And if you think you're bold enough, share this story, invite another untamed heart to the hunt. There is always room for one more in the moonlight. This was Tales by Jenny Moon. Until the next page turns, keep your senses sharp, the night is alive, and it always has more to tell. Rest if you must, keep the moon close if you dare, and if you feel eyes on you, or hear a whisper behind your door, do not panic. It's only a story. Or is it?